Council. We are still debating what to call these new conversations. Some of the ideas we've thought of are Downtown Gabby. You feel free to laugh. Chamber Chat. Tacoma's Got Council. An Hour with the Council. My Dinner with Bruce.
Or Conversations with the Council.
Or Wednesday Night Boxing. We're glad that so many members of the council were able to be with us this evening. Seth Grimes from Ward 1 is unable to be with us tonight, but we do have Tim Mayle from Ward 2, the mayor, Bruce Williams, Terry Siemens from Ward 4, Jarrett Smith from Ward 5, and we're expecting Fred Schultz to arrive. He was in Annapolis doing work for the city this afternoon.
He was testifying at a session that started at 1 o'clock. He got to testify at 6 o'clock.
So we hope we get to see Fred a little bit later.
He will be here shortly.
So we came up with the idea jointly, actually, together with you, the council, during the last election forum, and we had such an enjoyable time discussing the role of the city that we thought it'd be nice to do it at a time when we weren't trying to decide, the fate of the next council. So we hope to be doing discussions like this periodically throughout the rest of this year and hopefully into future years. So having introduced who we are, let me introduce. So we have Sarah Scully from the Tacoma Park Gazette to my right, and to my left we have Bill Brown. He's the managing editor of the Tacoma Voice, and I am Eric Bond. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Tacoma Voice. So why don't we start with a question from Sarah?
Yeah, so I thought I'd start off with the Tacoma Junction. The city asked for requests for proposals recently. It sounds like you all have been getting some in. So what have you been hearing? Is there a direction that the city would like to go with that lot that's a city-owned lot at Tacoma Junction? Currently there's the auto shop there and the co-op parking lot.
Well, from the most recent briefing from the city manager, there was a large response. I think it was about 40 people came to the meeting he had. I'm open to see what ideas developers have for the lot, for possibly the co-op, and maybe including the other properties. I don't know, but I don't want my vision for that development to take over what some of the creativity some of the developers may have.
So
go ahead. I was just going to say, I think that one of the nice things that I like about the approach that we're using is that it is it really presents it as a clean piece of paper, lets the people come and make their proposals, then puts the onus on the council to kind of work with the community to decide what the community really wants. But I think from what I understand from the information in the briefing section that the city manager held, it was a good mix of not just big developers, but also local people who are interested in the property, and maybe some of the surrounding properties to see how it could be integrated to come up with some dynamic ideas.
And Councilmember Siemens touched on an important point for our residents to know, which is that we haven't put any parameters on this to this point. Once we get those responses, that's when we want to have the conversation with the community with that information in hand to say, here's some interesting proposals, here's some ideas, let's talk about it. So anybody who's thinking, well, gee, they've gone out and what's going on, we need more information. There isn't anything to have right now, but it's a future conversation.
And I would have put just a couple of parameters on the proposal. I would have made very clear that we expect the height limits allowed under current zoning to be the maximum height limits for anything built on those sites. And I think the wooded lot behind the property, there's been discussion of having parking access, underground parking access, or access to the site, exit or enter from Columbia Avenue, and I just can't imagine that's not going to cause a great deal of distress for people who live on Columbia Avenue, Sycamore Avenue, and associated streets. So I would have put some cautions in there around those two ideas. But other than that, as my colleagues have said, looking forward to seeing the diversity.
Is there any talk at this point of moving, into like the Tacoma Auto Shop and the Healy Surgeon, or and having kind of a larger footprint, or?
The RFP has been invited developers to think about incorporating other properties besides just the city-owned lot, any of the adjoining properties in their plans. So leave it up to the developers at this point to see what they want to work out with the property owners and what kind of proposal they want to make.
And it's interesting that Councilmember Mayle used the phrase within the existing zoning height limits for that property, since that was a point of contention in our discussion last night about the proposal for the WMATA site at the Tacoma Metro, and the developer's proposal there, looking for something 70 to 80 feet high when the existing zoning restricts it to 40 or 50 feet high. So
what is the existing zoning height at the junction?
don't know. Not terribly high.
Not terribly high. More two-story? Well, the firehouse is 2 stories.
Probably somewhere in the vicinity of 40 feet.
40 feet, that's 3 stories?
Yeah.
Okay. So the way that happened, reading between the lines, it certainly looked like, I could be wrong, that the co-op came up with a proposal, and then you guys said, that's an interesting proposal, but maybe other people could bring in other proposals that would be even better for the city or more lucrative for the city. And so then you opened it up to wider bids, is that right, basically?
With one correction to what you said, the co-op didn't come with a proposal. They said they would like to have an agreement for an exclusive period of time where they could come forward with something. Mm-hmm. Kind of an exclusive agreement, and we didn't want to go into an exclusive agreement with them.
Right.
We wanted to see what people could come up with.
But the co-op is still interested because they've been talking about expanding. They're still interested in that spot.
Yes.
Okay.
The co-op is still interested in, and I think it's on the council we have a responsibility to consider what's best for the residents of Tacoma Park.
Okay. Well, I still say a tower with a revolving restaurant at the top would be a great view.
If it
great
looks like
view.
a water tower, we might be able to make it work.
Okay.
A historic water
There
tower.
is, well, there's an historic precedent. Wasn't it where the watchtower was back in Gilbert's day? Right.
Well, we'd have to build the log
you have
cabin
questions,
then.
We'd have to rebuild the log cabin, yes. So Councilmember Schultz has joined us. Hello.
In his Annapolis garb.
Yeah.
Did you have fun?
Yeah, I had a good time. I got there at 1:45 for a hearing to start at 2:30 and got to testify a little bit before 6. And I had all of 2 minutes,
Wow.
which they enforce.
So you were testifying about?
HUR, Highway User Revenue Funding. There's a bill that's been submitted in the Senate and cross-filed in the House of Delegates that would change the formula such that highway user revenues wouldn't be just automatically channeled directly through counties and then eked out to the municipalities, but we would get a share of it right off the top. I couldn't tell you more about it because I didn't read the bill, because the bill itself is nothing but a series of phrases amending the existing law. So,
But it'll affect how much money we get, revenue we
yes,
get
yeah,
from
the
the
whole
state.
point is that it would get us hopefully back at some point to where we used to be in fiscal year 2009.
Okay. Can I? Oh, I had another. Can I segue into something else? similar, I mean, on the same theme. You people have been going to Annapolis a lot, and you were in Richmond today. And there's been,
I go next week.
you go next week, okay. And that's been a lot, and I've heard other stories similar to what you just said, that you go and you have to wait for hours. And I'm just, can you explain what is that, why you as city people would be going to Annapolis, or I assume to Rockville, and what is the purpose of that? What are you guys doing when you do that?
You want to answer?
There's lots of bills that affect municipalities in general, and sometimes Tacoma Park in particular. One of the bills that we went to Annapolis this year for was to remove the, what's the word? The sunset provision of our alcohol bill that we got through a couple of years ago, making it so that basically restaurants in Tacoma Park can have off sales of alcohol in addition to on sale, so that if you go to a restaurant and you like the bottle of wine that you had for dinner, you can buy one and take it home. So we had to go to remove that sunset, otherwise that would have phased out as of June 30th, so that provision would no longer be in state law. So we had to convince them that we still want that. We haven't had any problems. We haven't had anybody apply for the license. Then there are other bills like the highway user revenue monies, where the city used to get about $550,000 a year. The state cut that to about $29,000 a year, and it's slowly been coming back up to where we're getting about half the $550,000. And that's a MML priority, so
MML?
Maryland Municipal League. And so we've been working for years to try and get that back. It's kind of the state equivalent of tax duplication in Rockville, where we had, formulas all worked out and everything was going okay. We had problems with the existing formulas in Rockville. And then when hard times hit, the state said, oh, we need the money, and took it. When hard times hit, the county said, oh, we need that money, and took it, even though it's in the county, in the example of the county and tax duplication, it's our taxpayers' money. And for highway user revenues with the state, it's a formula that was set up decades ago to take a portion of the money that we all pay when we get a vehicle titled or buy gasoline, and it's based on road miles for gasoline. And so it's a way to get the tax that goes to the state back to the locality to pay for the repair of our local roads, since it's not just our residents who use our roads, it's everybody.
And Bill, I'd just like to add that I think this is an area of strength that has really evolved under Mayor Williams' leadership. In the past, the council has testified at other policy bodies such as the county and state, but it's something that Bruce has really encouraged council members to do, and we testify many more times than I've ever seen in the past, and really to the benefit of the city residents.
It's mostly about money?
Not always, no. Allowing the restaurants to serve alcoholic beverages is an example where it was economic development. So I guess it's in kind of a way about money.
Streetlights, there's a bill
Right.
To give municipalities a stronger hand in terms of negotiating with Pepco over purchasing streetlights. That's another example.
And we had the conversation a while back about a state bill that went in to reduce the distance where you can hunt with bow and arrow in the state, and the bill was to reduce that distance in Montgomery County. We had discussions about whether we wanted to support it or oppose it. We ended up being 3-3 tied, so we didn't take a position, so we didn't go testify on that one. But it's the kind of bill where we are having those discussions about what's going on that could affect us, and deciding, do we want to take a position or not? It's a regular agenda item every week, legislative update. We hear from the deputy city manager, who coordinates with our lobbyist, our advocate in Annapolis. So we have eyes and ears in Annapolis Michelle Douglas picks up what's going on that could affect us and gets back and says, do you have a position on this? We might need somebody to testify. It's important. Coordinate and make it happen.
And since we clearly have bow hunters in Tacoma Park, That's a very real issue.
As a matter of fact, in my neighborhood, in Ward 4 this year, we did have a nice buck killed with a bow and arrow within close proximity to other residences. In fact, he staggered, if you will excuse that, to another property where he collapsed and died and was drugged back to the original property, much
Yeah.
to the chagrin of the neighbors.
To change subject very dramatically, and this is an oversight from my introduction, but obviously one of your fellow council members is missing this evening, and Kay Daniels Cohen would probably be sitting right there in the center. I think anybody who knew her, feels what a loss it is, and all of you have been working with her for the last few years, and we'd like to hear some information about what's being done to fill her seat, but also maybe a little bit about what it was like to work with her and how she represented the spirit of our city. If anybody cares to comment.
I'll talk about the spirit part. I mean, it was wonderful to sit with someone who more often than not said yes to anything. She was just so enthusiastic about things that would make life in the city better for residents. And I think of her particular passions, community gardening or gardens, the playground space on Sligo Mill, off Sligo Mill, and trying to get a playground built there. Everything from sidewalks to some of the election policy issues we did. She just had such strong passions about those things, and it was really fun to work with her, and I'm going to miss having her up here.
Yeah, and she just, whatever she worked on, she just kept at it and kept at it and kept at it. And it was tough to see over the last 13 months her wanting to keep on at the level that she had been going and just being unable to. And some things slipping through the cracks. And, she ran again last fall because being a council member was just about the most important thing in her life. And it was what kept her going. And as she got toward the end and just couldn't do those things, it was really tough.
I would just add that Kay Daniels Cohen was the kind of a person who would ask the question that I was sitting there saying, oh, if I ask that question, people are going to think I don't know very much about what I'm talking about, so I don't want to look dumb. But Kay didn't care about things like that. She really kind of put herself in the shoes of her constituents and kind of caught their vibes, and she was just real forthright in asking questions and sort of saying, well, why, the simple ones, why can't we get this done? What is it taking so long? This is, I want action. So she was a mixture of substance and style, and I think her style of what I call positivism was, you could sort of say, oh, well, it's just cheerleading, but it was more than that, because she was underneath, I sensed a very serious person who was just utterly determined in getting things that she felt that she wanted to get. It wasn't just a show, and she was good at that. And what it did, she just had this way that was, to me, rather remarkable, of infecting other people with sort of its can-do spirit. Can-do is kind of overused, but still, I think that really characterized her. And as I said to somebody, she was in some ways a character, because she was a very unique personality, and that wherever she went, she left a string of, remember when I said this to you, I think it was, she left a string of anecdotes behind her. Because, you couldn't meet her and talk to her without coming away with thinking about things slightly differently than you did before.
And there's a special election in like 30 days, approximately 30 days, April 8th, is that right?
Yes.
April 8th, and there's a 20 days prior to the election, you have to file a petition that has to be signed by 10 people, eligible voters in your ward.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
And there's early voting on the 6th and the 7th.
Okay.
And on the 8th, the election is going to be in the basement level of the firehouse.
Right.
And there's same-day registration, and there's 16 and 17-year-old voting.
Okay, I'd like to turn to Washington Adventist Hospital now. There's a lot of concern about the emergency services being moved up to White Oak. I was wondering what the status of that is.
I know that the timeline for the whole process kind of continues to slowly work its way. The thing that we've been anticipating is they're getting to the next stage where there's of the certificate of need application, and then when it gets to a certain point and all of the paperwork is in and the state says okay, then there's a 30-day comment period, and the city wants to comment in that 30-day period. My best sense at this point is that that 30-day period is probably going to come in June. We had originally thought that it might come as early as December of 2013, so we've kind of been working the time frame forward as things evolve. And the particular piece that I think was the focus of your question was about the emergency services.
Mm-hmm.
There is a moratorium, I think, until June or July of 2015 on the state considering any freestanding emergency room. If the hospital gets to move to White Oak, they couldn't leave a freestanding emergency room here. They've talked about various other things that they would leave here in that space. I would say that it's also been fairly clear that the state is not looking kindly toward incentives to have more emergency services. They're looking for a lot of the people who use emergency services to use something other than the emergency room, because that's the most expensive way to care for people. And a lot of people who go to emergency rooms just don't need an emergency room. They're using it as their family doctor. So there's no incentive for a hospital to basically have that cost drain of an emergency room, and the state is not making it easy for anybody to do that, and they won't give a license. They won't give dual site licenses, so the hospital can't have a licensed hospital at one location in White Oak and a freestanding emergency room in Tacoma Park. So it's not feasible right now, and it's all going to be looked at again when if and when the moratorium gets lifted in 2015.
I was just going to say that the Washington Adventist Hospital, as part of their plans for their move, is looking at having a clinic here in Tacoma Park, along with many other services that will address at least some of the people who currently use the emergency room. But again, providing for a true emergency room service looks like that's not going to be an option just because of state law.
Well, wasn't there something that weren't there exceptions to that? Someone was bringing up.
There are two places that in the state that they do have the freestanding emergency rooms. One is in, was it Clarksville, Poolsville, up in that area? And the other's down in
Shady, like Shady Grove up that way.
yeah, and the other one's down on the eastern shore.
So why can't we do
And-
that?
And because
It's a
that's where they have a moratorium on those. They have authorized those on a trial basis and said that they will not authorize more until they see how that trial goes.
Oh,
And this, you got to understand, the state does not believe in freestanding emergency rooms. I mean, we've talked to our consultant, we've talked to Joyce Newmeyer, the president of the hospital. We've looked for different ways to get around this because we are listening to the residents. Residents want an emergency room. But we can't just change the law or have District 20 representatives create legislation that says that we're going to have freestanding emergency rooms when the medical practitioners of the state of Maryland do not believe that is the right direction for medical care in this state. So, I mean, we're kind of boxed in. They believe in having primary care physicians, and they believe that is the best way for people to receive medical care. And they want fewer hospitals, not more. So that's their direction.
well, will new insurance laws change that? Will more people be having primary doctors?
I don't think everybody I mean, this is the conversations we've had with Joyce. She doesn't know what the Affordable Care Act is going to do to her business. They hope it's going to be positive, but they don't know yet because they're still implementing it.
Yeah, I would just add that if the state of Maryland's laws were different, it might be possible that Washington Adventist Hospital would be willing to put that into their certificate of need application. No one here on the city council has any particular opposition to the idea of a freestanding emergency room. And we have, of course, seen the emails that we've received from a number of residents who feel that this is really a critical thing. But in our state, hospitals in particular are very heavily regulated in terms of their cost structures and the fees that they can charge. And from the hospital's and medical care point of view, emergency care is the most expensive way to help people. And when you have an emergency room, people tend to go to it first before they do anything else because it's there, and a lot of people don't have primary physicians. So what happens is that the emergency rooms fill up. A lot of people can't pay for it. The hospitals lose a lot of money doing this, but they have to take care of these people. They can't not do it. So it's a bind that the hospital finds itself in, and one of the aggravating things is that a lot of people that show up in emergency rooms statistically don't need to be there. They could be in an urgent care facility or in a community clinic like the one that's just been opened over here at the Washington Adventist Hospital Community Clinic Incorporated, which is already situated and is going to expand eventually so that it can take in more people. So it's a complicated situation, but right now, like has been said, the state has put a moratorium on this whole concept of freestanding emergency rooms. And Joyce Newmeyer, the president of Washington Adventist Hospital, has said to us is that they cannot put that into their certificate of need application. They've been warned not to, and basically told if you do, you're just going to wreck the whole thing. We're not going to be able to consider it at all. So don't do that.
Yeah, I'd just like to add that it maybe sounds like we're not supportive of that in some way. Many of us on this council have advocated for an emergency room to be left behind, but we're presenting to you what the problems are that we're facing, and there is the state law, there is the fact that the hospital's been told not to put it in their plans. And so right now, it looks like the reality is it's not going to be there. That doesn't mean that we don't continue to ask for it.
And the Adventist Hospital is still talking about a health and wellness facility of some kind. Is that correct? On the campus?
Well, they're going to leave certain services.
Right.
I don't know if you would characterize it health and wellness, but some of their services that they're doing now at the hospital, they'll leave, and then the rest of them they'll push over to the new location.
Yeah, I haven't heard that term in their recent discussions.
Yeah, that was
Yeah, I don't think-
several years ago. That was
Yeah.
their first
Right.
proposal.
They've kind of moved away from that term.
Yeah.
And
So it's going to be doctor's offices and
Do the
like
doctors
x-rays
have
and...
a wound care facility, psychiatric, both inpatient and outpatient,
Right.
which is already there. The urgent care facility, leasing space to the university.
The doctor's offices are condos, so they're owned by the doctors, so that's not leaving. There's a building on the campus that's owned by the doctors.
Is that when you're driving up the
Yes.
that's the one on the left?
Yes.
Okay. And so what happens to the hospital? It's a big building. What are they going to do with that?
Well, they're going to, part of it will be for an urgent care facility. Part of
Urgent
it-
care?
Yes.
That's not the same as emergency.
Correct.
No.
It's not the same.
it's not 24/7.
And it
okay.
will not handle the same type of traumatic type of situations an emergency room would handle.
Okay.
And then a large portion of it, hopefully, will be leased to the university. And the university and the hospital are going back and forth, trying to come to terms on what that lease agreement looks like.
And one thing I want to add, I think most people don't realize that the whole structure for medical services in Maryland and reimbursement for medical services is different than in every other state in this country. It's just entirely different in its structure. And so if anybody is looking at any other place in the country and saying, well, if they can do it here, why can't we do, if they can do it there, why can't we do it here? And it's regulated and structured in a very different way. The state decides how Medicare gets done here. It's just way different.
I mean, just speaking on more of a personal basis, not for my colleagues, but this is one of the most complicated areas of policy in the country and the most rapidly changing that has befuddled everyone at every level of government, our healthcare system. When I think of an emergency room, what does an emergency room do? It provides anything you need, neurologists, cardiac specialists. You can draw, the idea behind an emergency room to me is that you can draw on any specialty that comes from somewhere in the hospital for something that comes in as an urgent problem. And I don't understand the economics of how you could possibly have a freestanding emergency room that doesn't have all of those specialists attached to it. Mm-hmm. And I'm assuming that's one of the complicated things. And I think we had heard at some point that either the Eastern Shore or the Shady Grove freestanding emergency room was not making money. Mm-hmm. And presumably some of those issues around delivery of service are important.
And
Shady Grove. It's a
Shady Grove.
And we've learned more about healthcare and how it works and how it doesn't work than I think any of us ever thought we would get into.
I'm going to do a follow-up, but you have something?
No, if you have a follow-up, go with that.
Well, I got a question from a resident about this, and you guys have been following it, of course, for years, and I've been watching you follow it for years, so I sort of understand how it unfolded. But I think a lot of people have not, and don't quite understand what happened. And the point of this forum is just to help. Is for people who haven't been following it religiously. Why would anyone except you guys? And the question is basically, how'd you let it go? How could you let how could you let the hospital go? Oh my God! So maybe you could just quickly explain how it happened that way. That you weren't able to hold on to it.
We don't have a whole bunch of money. Extra money. Well, it originally started, the hospital wanted to expand on the campus, right? They wanted a new parking garage. They wanted to renovate some of their buildings, maybe build another building. Residents around the campus did not want any new buildings, especially a parking garage. The hospital itself, it was built a long time ago, and to make any improvements to it, you would have to do serious major construction. Hospitals nowadays make a lot of money with single rooms. And in Washington Adventist Hospital, you share rooms. So they're not making the type of money that they would think that they could make in a new hospital. So when they ran their numbers, it's cheaper to build a new hospital than it would be to try to renovate this campus. And also, I believe it's 9 acres and only 7 of them are developable. So they're constricted. They just don't have the massing or the land to build a hospital that is the future of healthcare. So, and the city doesn't have $200 and some million to give them while they're losing money. And this is according to them that they're losing money every month or every quarter. We can't make up that hole. So, I mean, you look for options, and I think this is the option that we all came to. I mean, we don't want the hospital to leave. I mean, I think everybody here has tried, come up with every avenue, every idea to have them stay, but it's just not possible.
And we've been talking with them every month to try and understand what their issues are, how this is evolving, and how we can get more of what our community needs.
I think it's important to say we've been talking with them every month recently.
Right.
When this first began and they first announced plans to expand on campus, there was not a lot of communication between the hospital and the council or city staff. We have much better relationship with people, with the administrators at the hospital and with Adventist Healthcare now. I think what happened, and who's really going to know the whole story, but their original proposal was to add doctor's office building, was to build a parking garage, and make some expansions within the hospital itself. And there was a lot of pushback from the community, most specifically the residents that live right in the immediate area, that the expansions they were proposing were going to significantly increase traffic. That was going to be a burden to the community. And so the city residents and the council kind of pushed back and said, what are your plans? Let's be specific, and let's look at what does work and doesn't work. We didn't get good interaction between the hospital and us, but what we did get was, I think, it forced them to look at their plans a little more closely. And as they did that, they realized that what they really needed for their own profitability, they weren't going to be able to attain on campus if they looked at, because some of the questions the community was asking is, where are you going to be 10 years from now? And when they started to look at that, they realized that, the current campus probably isn't going to be a good place to be 10 years from now.
Yeah, they realized looking 10 years out that if they put the money in that they were looking to put in for the expansion to get them that 10 years, that it would be money down the drain, because then at that 10-year point when they looked around, they had nowhere to go and they wouldn't be able to do anything, and they'd have to start thinking about looking somewhere else. That's what kind of forced their reevaluation.
And unlike some of the other hospitals, like Holy Cross, had bought up some of the houses around their property so they could expand into the neighborhood. That wasn't an option that they had here in Tacoma Park, nor that we wanted them to have here in Tacoma Park.
Right.
Well, I have a question that that moves us off of healthcare and does not directly address a policy that you have a lot of control over. But when I think about the council and mayor in Tacoma Park, you are elected officials. A lot of what you do is work behind the scenes, or actually right out in the open, and a lot of us aren't watching as you are figuring out how to make sure that things run in the city. But you also are representatives of the particular wards. You're the leaders from the wards, and I'm interested in hearing what you've seen in terms of difficulties with income over the last period. Last year, there was big cuts to Meals on Wheels with the sequester cuts, and now we have cuts to food stamps, SNAP. I know that this is not an area that the city can address very well in terms of policy, but maybe you could tell us a little bit about the state of the city. Is this a situation that is becoming more of a problem, or are we finding solutions? What do you see in your wards?
It's an overwhelming problem in my ward. The Office of Housing and Community Development has data that shows, residents that need social services, right? We track it. And since last year, there's been a huge spike. I'm working with Sarah Danes to try to put my arms around it, trying to figure it out. Where is it coming from? What are these things that residents need? Is it food? Is it rent assistance? Is it, we're trying to figure it out. But there is a big spike in social service needs in Ward 5.
The City Council has recognized that, and we have worked as a council to address some of those issues. We've done it through our grant programs, and in fact, addressing some of the food needs of the lower income residents. We gave a grant, it was nearly $50,000, I think, to Educare this year to supply food to needy people and families. We have increased the amount of money that we give for emergency housing assistance, and we have worked with other nonprofit organizations to provide other assistance, such as some assistance to backpack, what do they call that, the food that the kids take home for the weekend, since they get some food assistance in the schools, but it provides some food for the kids on the weekends.
Right, lately that had to have been a problem with the snow days.
Yeah, right.
Children who don't go to school don't get the...
It's a huge problem, and
months
it's something
for
that's grown over the last few years, and not just with the children. Of course, that's where everyone's heart is, but many of the seniors that are on very limited incomes, that they don't have a lot of money left after they pay their rent, and don't have a lot of money left to buy food. As you know, my wife and I are involved in 3 different food programs to try to assist people in our community that need some help with specifically food issues, but clothing and other issues too.
And a lot of what they've been talking about points to the effort that we've made recently to overhaul our way that we approach how we do grants. So we've tried to have more partnership with organizations that are doing services like this, and partnerships with other organizations that are providing grants, so that we can coordinate and maybe have a little bit more effect in what we do, target some of these things. We had a fairly, I think, a less targeted grants program, and we've overhauled it very recently, and I think it's going to be a lot more effective, because this is an area that we haven't really put a lot of time and effort and money into, because social services are essentially a county function and a state function, not a municipal function. And but we just like everything else, we see it firsthand. We're closest to it at this level, and so we want to try and do what we can.
I just add that, and it's not so much something that's happened or changed in the last couple of years, but of course the city has rent control. So half of our residents live in rental buildings or apartments. The vast majority of those are either under the city's rent control policy or in lower income housing provider situations. And so, I mean, as much as anything, what the city has done for, decades, is provide a home for people who are not, whose income is not necessarily at the top of the brackets. And that's huge. I mean, I would guess that it has, if you think about the foregone property tax income, if everything was priced at full market value, that's a loss of revenue. That's, that has an effect on the community that makes Tacoma Park a great place. It means that we've been, I think, a rock in terms of holding on to that population. Whereas, and I think Cheer came out with a survey, I think it was either 2 or 3 years ago, Cheer, community health and education through community health and empowerment through education and research.
Which is a Tacoma Park.
NGO, yeah. Tacoma Park NGO focused on these very issues. They looked at rent here and in Silver Spring and nearby areas, and the average rent in Tacoma Park is hundreds of dollars cheaper. That's a real benefit. I mean, hundreds of dollars cheaper across thousands of people year after year. So I think that's really one of the most significant things we do.
And as we have created the affordable housing here in Tacoma Park, the council's also recognized responsibility that, if we're trying to attract a diverse cross-section, economic cross-section into our community, that we also have a responsibility to, provide the services that are needed by those same people that we want to attract to our city.
I think the problem from where I sit in Ward 6, which for those who are listening, it is on the eastern side of the city, bounding on both sides of New Hampshire Avenue, is really hard. It's complex and hard to get a handle on. Part of the problem that I perceive, and I just say part because I don't understand the wholeness of it. But for example, New Hampshire Towers, which is a 12-story apartment building next to the recreation center, has about 240 dwelling units. There's a lot of subsidized units in that building under an agreement between the owner of that building and Montgomery County. The building is full of people from foreign nations, lots and lots of African people, lots of people whose English is really lousy. And what we have found, what I've found recently, in talking to some of the people in their leaders, is that most of those people in the building aren't even aware of the programs that are available to them already. For example, right across the street at the Lutheran Church is the base of Meals on Wheels. And if you talk to Jill Feasley, who's the director and runs that, she's the chef, she says they are looking for applications. They're looking for customers, clients. That program costs a person $7 a day, either elderly or disabled person. And if they can't afford that, and for that they get one hot meal and one cold meal, if they can't afford that, Meals on Wheels puts it on a sliding scale all the way down to zero. But she has got capacity for clients that's available. So right across the street, 100 yards away, is a building with people in it who probably need it. And so what you've got is a breakdown in communication. What is the magnitude of that offset? I don't know, but this is just an example. Another picture on this is the Crossroads Farmers Market, which has the Fresh Checks program, and I don't remember the statistics. It's entering its 8th year. They have this Fresh Checks programs, which basically doubles the value of people's SNAP and other coupons that they have, so that they can buy the fresh produce at basically 50% off from the farmers. That program is just extremely successful. Every year, the number of clientele that use those fresh checks goes up and up and up. And it's been a very successful program. It was the first one in the United States to do that. And now the farmers markets, thousands of them across the country, do that. The point is that we know that there's people out there in need. We know that there are programs, but sometimes the problem isn't an adequacy of programs. It's getting the people matched up, and that's a situation that we have. That I can attest to it in Ward 6.
And Fred makes a very good appeal for volunteers. Anyone interested in helping with any of these projects should give one of us a call.
And
We need to watch our time here.
can I just take another 30 to 60 seconds on this one?
Yeah.
I just want to take it to another piece that ties to this that I don't think people sometimes think about. As we've expanded our partnerships and as the city has done more in this area, and particularly as Tim was talking about with the whole status of rents in this city and basically foregone tax revenues from market rents that we don't have people paying here. That's a cost that gets shifted somewhere for the city to run. And what it essentially shifts to is single-family homeowners who pay the bulk of taxes to provide the revenues to run the city. And what we've been trying to do, and I think we're going to have some successes in this going forward, is to shift some of that burden to get revenues from economic development, from businesses paying taxes, providing the services that we want locally so that we don't have to get somewhere by transit or by car and create more problems that way, but have those services here so that we've been looking at economic development long range as a way to kind of work ourselves out of the box of how to pay for these good programs.
Oh, boy.
So I know last week we all had a big meeting about crime with, I think, people from the county and some neighboring jurisdictions. I was wondering if you would tell us about what you heard, what the discussions were, and if any new partnerships or efforts came out of that.
I think that was a couple of different meetings going on, all rolled into one. There was the particular concern about crime in neighborhoods, in a neighborhood in particular. And there was the tie to the fact that Tacoma Park is kind of on the frontier with more jurisdictional borders than just about anywhere else in this area, with two counties, the district, with Metro Police, with Park Police. So all of the cross-border interjurisdictional issues that spring from that, trying to find solutions for better coordination and communication with all of those other entities and agencies. I think one of the things that came out of it was hearing a desire, a renewed desire and maybe an amplified desire by people who feel that technology can provide some answers. And so I think that one of the discussions that's going to come out of this is the council is going to need to talk about the place for public cameras, for private cameras, for potential increase in license plate readers, and the piece that's on the other side of that, which is the whole question about civil liberties. As the question came up in that forum about why doesn't the city do more with cameras, And why does the city only retain the data from the license plate readers for 30 days instead of a year? I pointed out that when we got into using those license plate readers, that was right after there was the whole brouhaha from the state police spying on Tacoma Park residents. And there was a real distrust on the council's part that sharing that information with other agencies, with the state, with the federal government, would just exacerbate that problem, so that we've been very cautious in how we approach this. And I can see that we need to kind of come back around on that and have a conversation about potential increase in use of either public or private cameras, and how that will affect civil liberties, and where the balance is on that. And I imagine that there's going to be strong feelings on both sides, but I think we need to have that conversation.
I'd just jump in and say that, to back up a little bit, and to back up my microphone, the city is safer and safer every year. The overall crime stats show over a decade, right, the number of crimes has dropped and dropped and dropped and dropped. And that's true all around the region, or at least Montgomery County and the nation. So, but I think the problem we heard about last week was, a spike and a hotspot for crime. And there are those come up, sort of on a case-by-case, season-by-season basis, and then they exist in the city in an enduring way in different parts of the New Hampshire Avenue corridor or Maple Avenue. So we have these hotspots. And I think, and I've talked to many of these residents personally, people who are victims in one of those hotspots, it doesn't feel like crime is going down. So there's that issue of how to deal with hotspots and whether we can do anything to react more quickly when they happen, whether there's any way we can prevent, a nascent hotspot from growing and persisting. There's an issue around customer service, and I think we as a city need to do a better job in terms of how the city staff interact with residents, particularly those who have been victims of crime, how we maintain a flow of information between, to the extent that we can share information, that feedback really helps people feel better. And the story that to me is still the most enduring and gripping one for me was the victim of a robbery or a carjacking that happened about a year and a half ago on New Hampshire Avenue at one of the gas stations, who was stabbed multiple times. And their stories of how the police did a fantastic job of customer service echoed all around the neighborhood. I got calls from people, saying, "Could you please let the police chief know that they did a fantastic job?" So I think we need to find ways to do better customer service, and then of course the interjurisdictional presence that you saw up here just a week ago. We need to figure out how to make that sort of collaboration, not just at the chief level, which I think actually does happen quite a bit, but at the level of the officers and the details, to make that happen more frequently and more routinely. And I think technology is part of the solution. And for example, I spoke to a regional vice president at one of the gas station companies this morning, and they have just installed new security cameras, 24/7 high-definition security cameras at one of the gas stations along the New Hampshire corridor that's monitored from some facility in Pennsylvania, and in theory can be hooked up to the police can get access to that data. So technology is coming and seeping in, but it's not just technology; it's also customer service and the human capacity of our department. And I think we need to work on all of those things while still. I will just keep repeating till my dying day that look at the crime trends overall as well. Don't forget that while it may feel like something has just happened or a couple of crimes have happened, what does the overall pattern look like? I think that's really important in the sense of the community. And we saw last week people who came out are largely the people who are victims. And there was also feedback from people saying, I don't know why this meeting's happening. It doesn't seem like anything has gone on in my neighborhood lately. And those people didn't come.
I would say that the meeting was a huge success. Let's all of us understand that this was not a meeting that came from the city. We didn't, here on the city council, didn't generate this meeting. This was something that came about because of actions of citizens who were angry and frightened and feeling uninformed and left in the dark as to why things were happening and what does this mean. And anytime you fill up a room like this and have standing room only, you've had a successful meeting. In fact, the meeting could have been much more loud and angry than it was. In fact, it was a terrific conversation that went on inside this room. I think everybody learned stuff from it. What will come out of it? It's just way too soon to tell. But I think what I see is something I've always seen since I've been on the city council, is that there just seems to be an inevitable gap between what the police do every day, 24 hours a day, and what the average resident perceives. You can talk to the police and you can hear their frustrations, and you talk to residents and they say, well, we don't ever see a patrol car go by our house, and all this sort of thing. And what I thought we saw here at this meeting was a perfect demonstration of residents feeling terribly anxious because they just don't know. And so it's always, to me, a question of how we can shrink that communication gap so that people understand more about how the police work, what their capabilities are, the technology thing, which is advancing and changing incredibly rapidly from what I've been able to learn. The whole technique of police work has changed in the last dozen years, because now with the crime analysis just going on, it's data driven. The police can anticipate where crime is going to occur before it occurs, in a sense. I mean, so that's one of the reasons that crime has dropped nationally, is that the police are ahead of the criminals, and a lot of the criminals are stupid, because if they weren't, they wouldn't be doing what they do in the way they do it. So I'm sorry to ramble on here, but I just think that this meeting last week was a really good thing to have happen, because you couldn't listen to that meeting and not palpably feel the emotion and the fear, and know that the police chiefs that were sitting up here were seeing it and feeling it themselves. So they know that they have to do a better job. And I believe that we're going to see improvements. I don't know exactly how or when, but it was a good meeting.
I would agree with Councilmember Schultz that it was a good meeting. I think it's obvious that if you are the victim of a crime, it doesn't matter how well the statistics are showing that the community is safer. It's no less traumatic to the victim than if the crime was a high rate of crime. The thing I think this meeting, and because of the way it was presented and formatted, and with all of the many police chiefs that were here, and the discussion that went on, I'd like to think that it's going to be a catalyst for improved policing in Tacoma Park. When I first joined the City Council, community members were very proud of our environmental initiatives and the leadership that we had shown in the city across the country with our environmental initiatives. And I think that through the years, the City Council has continued to grow that reputation, and continues to work in that with our sustainability coordinator that we're hiring, and I would like to see Tacoma Park develop that same type of image in policing, where our police department is recognized as a innovative leader within the country for policing techniques. Some of that might be new technology, that some of it might be just different types of techniques and not just doing traditional law enforcement, but doing some untraditional crime prevention. And I think that with the council's support, we can help the police department to develop into more modern and leading-edge approaches.
And crime prevention was one of the issues that came out of that forum as something that the people who put that whole forum together felt was very important to have an increase in.
I think it's our responsibility to make sure that the police department has the tools that they need to prevent this type of crime. I mean, I read the crime stats every week. I talk to command staff, and this is following a certain type of pattern. Overall, stats may be down, but this is a certain type of pattern. And they believe that if they do certain things, they can put a dent on these type of criminal actions. And it's our responsibility to give the police the things that they need, whether it's cameras, whether it is fixed license plate readers, so that we can go after these criminals, because they're targeting us. These aren't random crimes. They're coming into Tacoma Park because they know that they can score. They can, break into people's homes and, get stuff. So we need to take an offensive position and come up with different types of mechanisms that would stop this. And we can do it.
And this isn't a council meeting, but I will say that it's not as easy as just saying yes to every request from the police department, because there are civil liberties and there are other interests of the city residents that we have to safeguard. And so I don't think it's going to be a slam dunk on making all these decisions.
And I understand that, there's civil liberties to come into play. But we have to ask ourselves, are we going to just allow people to break into our residents' homes? I mean, if we don't do something, it's going to continue to happen, because the criminals are looking at us as easy targets.
This is a good issue as we've wound up our hour, and we'll have to think about for our next forum maybe broadening the discussion of a philosophy of crime and how to do that, how to balance that, because nobody here is, I don't believe anybody on the council is pro-crime. And I believe that everybody on the council is for protecting civil liberties, and so drawing that line is very important. And it is interesting what the mayor said earlier about because the first thing I heard after the forum was how come two of the city's license plate readers don't work? I said everybody said to me, and well, we're not really using that technology because there were these concerns,
We have one camera that's working out
one
of
that
three.
works. Yeah, 1 out of 3. So,
That's a
but
management issue.
right, and there's a history to it, and it's important for people to understand the history. I live in a hot spot, so I know what it's like to reassess your view of your own property and your relationship with the police. On the other hand, Tacoma Park has developed a reputation for paying particular attention to against surveillance. So anyway, I'm opening up a can of worms that we can't devour at the moment.
And just let me add on the 2 license plate reader cameras, the 2 sets that aren't working. My understanding is that pretty much all of the license plate readers probably in the country, but certainly in the Washington metropolitan area, have been funded through federal grants, UASI grants, UASI, and I don't remember what it's, Urban Area Security Initiative grants. And a set of cameras and the stuff that goes with it costs like $40,000 a pop. And we could get more cameras and they're, they're funneled through this grant, through the Council of Governments and that whole setup there. But nobody has set up maintenance on that contract. So as the cameras don't work, it's like, okay, who repairs these things? It's not just a simple question of, well, we procured it from this vendor and the vendor provides service. It's kind of at the place in this whole setup where the new ones are coming out, but nobody's dealing with that maintenance issue. And we can get more cameras through that same funding source. However, one of the caveats of getting more cameras is you have to feed the information back into the fusion center, so it goes back to the state, back to the feds. And the timing was really interesting that it was at the day before, the day of the forum. The story in the Washington Post that morning was all about the Homeland Security saying, oh, well, we're going to create this huge, big national database, and we're going to pull all this information together, and like 2 days later, they backed off and said, oops, we're not going to do it. So it's a very timely issue for how the country is dealing with this right now.
Let me just jump in, because there's a different technology angle, which is that 3 of the stories of the people who were there involved technology from the perspective that their technology that was stolen pinpointed a location after it was stolen. One was a person who made a purchase on a credit card and provided a delivery address for the purchase after the card was stolen. Another was a laptop with a low jack system that had a couple of pings at a location in the district. And the third was, again, a laptop with a location on it. And those residents certainly, when I talked to them at least, didn't understand why that didn't result in a search warrant or a visit, and I still don't understand that. But I don't, and the fact that that doesn't result in any clear police action that can follow suggests there's another issue around technology beyond these cameras. Because if there had been a chance to identify a suspect through those means, that may have been more important than having more license plate readers. Right? They took it to their home or some location. And we didn't have the ability, our police don't have the ability maybe, to be able to go to those places to get a search warrant. That may have been more important in stopping the crimes than a license plate reader.
Getting low on, running out of time, and I have a big pile of questions left. I barely know where to start.
You could just have one of us answer each one. You can call on us.
Well, I don't even have time for that. This was, I think I should go to things submitted, but, well, I do want to.
That'll be on the way out.
All right. This was submitted by a resident. Is the city considering the environmental damages that a dog park will cause? This will be mostly permanent soil compaction and destruction of vegetation, but may also include concentrated fecal coliforms and disease transmission. You.
And identify if you own a dog.
I have cats.
Anybody
How
up
do you
here?
feel about a cat park?
But
You
I
have
think
dogs.
I think that council tries to look at the pros and cons of everything we do, and when staff presents information to us that is going to have negative effects, whether it be on the environment, on nearby residents, or whatever, that we take that into consideration as we decide what's going to be overall best for the community. So. I think those are important issues. To what extent they're valid, I have to wait and see what the staff analysis is. But I would like to think we don't make these decisions with our head in the sand.
Yeah, I'm a dog owner. Have been for years and years, many dogs. Used to be a time when there's no such thing as dog parks. You just open the door, let your dog go out. And then you whistled when it was time for the dog to come back. And if he didn't, you just went looking for him. And now, anyway, dog parks have exploded in popularity across the United States. I've seen them all kinds in different places. It's really about the quality of the design and the quality of the management. If you're just going to put a fence up and put a gate on it and say, welcome dogs, you're going to have problems. My concern about having dog park here in the city is partly where it's going to be, but more with how can we be assured that it will be well maintained by the people that use the park, and cleaning up after their dog and doing all that sort of thing. And I think those are manageable problems. I'm not worried about compaction of soil. You can put different surfaces down that will not allow that to happen. There's all kinds of interesting solutions that can be developed that will make it safe for people, children who come into the park with their parents, and the dogs themselves. I mean, dog lovers really, more than anybody, want to make sure that their dogs have a good experience and are, remain healthy through all this. They don't want to go into a situation where their paws are going to pick up bacteria or they're going to get bitten by another dog or stuff like that.
Okay, well.
Next question.
We, of course, have many more questions. We knew that we never get close to asking enough questions when we have an election forum, which often goes, much longer than even we've gone this evening. So we look forward to having future discussions, maybe focusing on particular themes in future. What was Bruce? What was the? I'm sorry, Mayor. What was the term we're calling this? Chamber chat? An hour with the council? Anyway, my dinner with the mayor.
Gee, can you get me into Republic?
I know a guy. So I have two questions as we depart, and the first is, whom do you support for the Ward 3 special election? So think about that for a second. And the second question is, what will it do for Tacoma Park when the next governor is a former council member?
So that was the first. Which was the first
I can answer both questions in fairly short order.
Okay.
I'll support the best candidate once we see who all of the people who could potentially run, who they are. And I wouldn't want to go out prematurely and say anything before we know. And on the next governor having the potential to be a former council member, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
Okay.
I will say that I will fully support Bruce Williams for Ward 3 if he decides to run, as he does live in Ward 3. And I think it'll be fantastic when Heather Mazur is governor of the state of Maryland.
I would think Heather would be a fantastic governor for our state, and I'll wait and see who the candidates are for Ward 3. I've only talked to one person.
Likewise, it's tempting to sort of want to just endorse somebody, but besides, I'm not even sure my endorsement would matter to anybody in Ward 3. I would suggest that it shouldn't. They can figure it out themselves. As with regard to Heather, I think that I'd like to think that it would make a big difference. That all of a sudden tax duplication would get solved. Highway user revenues would just get done the way we want, and so forth and so on. But the reality is that when she becomes governor, it's such a big job and it's so new and there's so many challenges that she could only wish that focusing on Tacoma Park was the main part of her job. We may see very much less of her than we do now. I hope she wins, but that would be really cool. It really would be. But it's going to be a big job for whoever gets in there. There's a lot of stuff that they're going to have to deal with, the governor.
No comment.
Okay, all right, well, I'm sure that all of you will get tickets to the inaugural ball in Indianapolis. Well, thank all of you for taking time out on another weeknight to come in. I know that you put in a lot of hours, every week to keep the city running, so we thank you for that. And we look forward to, continuing this discussion down the road. I want to thank my colleagues, Sarah Scully from the Tacoma Park Gazette and Bill Brown from the Tacoma Voice, and we'll keep talking.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.